Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council, opening at 7 p.m. We are still spaced appropriately according to COVID restrictions in the chamber. We are not yet able to invite or welcome you into the chamber because of these restrictions, but as soon as they are removed, you will be welcome back and public question time will also return in a revised format. I remind you of our new meeting procedures and let you know that we have one deputation who is running a little late, and I'll explain that a little later when we get to that point in the meeting. At the last meeting, I had some complaints about some elected members going well over the 3 minutes or not being able to hear the bell. So there is a change to this, and the warning bell will sound like this. Over to you, Mr. Cooper. So the warning bell is a 2 bell, and the bell at 3 minutes will ring for longer, inviting you to finish your sentence, preferably before the bells stop. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. A reminder too about the use of one question at a time. Please be respectful of each other and their opinions during these debates and not interrupt the person speaking or talk while they are debating. Now please stand for the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the original custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in, or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. In the case of an emergency, an alarm will sound and then please follow directions of the staff. I remind you that all council meetings are live streamed through the council's website and a copy of the agenda is available by downloading from this website. Members, please raise your hand to indicate when you wish to speak and use your microphones when speaking and switch them off when you finish. I ask you now to turn off your mobile phones or place them on silent during the meeting. We have absences. We have one apology from Councillor Piggott. We have no leave of absences, and we need to, declaration of interest reminder. Oh yes, if a council member has an interest, is there anyone who has a declaration of interest on any matter on the agenda tonight? No, thank you. Right, confirmation of the minutes. Can I seek a mover, please? Councillor Davey? All right, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Davis. You wish to ask a question?
I just wondered what the numbering was in the above each.
I haven't got a copy with you.
Pardon, we haven't had that numbering system included in the minutes before, and I just wondered what that, I mean, I can see it's a resolution number, but there's another number alongside it, I assume. Could we please have some clarification?
Certainly, through Madam Mayor, just to clarify, for example, you're talking about the number C281121-12722, for example? Yes. So that's just a reference number we place against every single resolution of council for our records. So when we're searching for a record, that's a reference number we put against each resolution. So to add on to that comment, once we improve our software, we'll end up with a dedicated resolution register that will enable very easy interrogation of that register on our motions before us, or that the council has adopted.
And will we have access to that?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Adjourn business. Sorry? Oh, sorry, we didn't, it was moved and seconded, now we need to vote. Sorry, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Adjourn business. There was a little complication last week in that with the new rules that we have to move a motion to adjourn any leftover items from a previous meeting to the beginning of this meeting, if that's what we so wish. That had been the common practice in the past, that we would start again where we left off and complete those items that were on the agenda that we didn't get round to last time. I seek leave of the meeting to actually do that tonight and start with those meeting items, which are 11.1, 13.1 and 13.2, because we didn't have, in the 30 seconds we had left at the very end of the meeting, we had no time nor opportunity, nor did any of us realise that we actually had to move a motion to adjourn those items.
Your Worship, that's not quite correct. A number of us did understand how that works, and I actually sought clarification from the Governance Officer last meeting, and I didn't move a motion to that effect, and nobody else did.
Well, that
So
needed to be moved on the night, and I was not aware, and
Yes,
I'm
but
sorry, but
rules
the
then
Governance
apply.
Officer didn't tell me either.
But no, that's fine, but the rules then apply that it goes back into our normal agenda. So the rules are that if this motion doesn't happen to move it to the front of this agenda, then they get added onto the next agenda, and that's how I think we should proceed tonight.
Well, I'm going to seek that clarification from our Governance Officer, please. That's contrary to what I've been.
Continue in order as they are written. Yeah, that's why you're seeking leave to change it.
Yes.
We should continue as
What are you wanting to do? Not
continue as is, as per the agenda.
right. Okay. So you're not in favour of me changing it.
No.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. I don't think it's appropriate, but I will anyway. I move that we follow your advice and complete the items that were not completed at the last meeting.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Turnbull. I now will put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? 6. It was lost, I believe. Did you do a double count? Okay. But therefore, we will be moving according to the agenda as in front of us. There is no public question time, and you did receive an email in relation to that today. The deputy unfortunately had problems with her internet and did not receive the confirmation that she was allowed to given permission to speak tonight. So she is coming, but is running late. Again, with your consent, when she arrives, I will suspend the items when the previous item has finished and move to the deputation and then revert back to the meeting. Yes, Councillor Davey.
In what item is the delegation in relation to, please?
It is not related to any of the items tonight. The delegation is related to the Brown Hill Creek Keswick project, where she wishes to inform us of issues to do with the South Parklands. Now, I understand that she does not live in Burnside, but she has spoken to each of the other councils involved in Brown Hill Creek and wishes to speak to us as well. Yes, Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, is she a member of the Brown Hill Creek Keswick?
No.
Or just a resident?
No.
Okay.
She's not a resident of Burnside. All right, so
Do we know where she's from?
in front of me, I haven't got her application, but it does yes, you can ask her, that's fine, when the time comes for certain. I only have a postbox number on the application. Okay, now we've no petitions, and we'll now go to 11.1, Chief Executive Officer's report. And I believe, if I'm correct, Wendy, that it was Councillor Henschke who withdrew it to speak. So I'm assuming that is the case remains. No, it doesn't. Okay, so what is the instruction then? proceed, so we start again with withdrawing motions. Thank you very much. All right, so I will run through the entire report and then go back and do the ones we haven't, that have been withdrawn. So, 11.1, Councillor Davey. 11.2, Councillor Lemon. 11.3, Councillor Lemon. Understory ornamental planting, Councillor Davey. Review of delegations. Failing that, I'm going to look towards this side because I usually get a hand go up from over here. So Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? Councillor Davis, are you voting here? Sure. Those against? You didn't vote first time round. If you're seated in your chair, you are required to vote.
Yeah, I missed it.
Carried. 11.6, operational and community land motion register. Failure to withdraw, so Councillor Cornish is moving, Councillor Hughes seconding. I'm sorry, maybe it was over that side, but do it that quickly. Okay, are those in favour? Carried. Mayor's report. Councillor, thank you. You're moving it? Oh, sorry, voting against the motion. Apologies. I thought I saw all hands up. Okay, 11.7, the Mayor's activity report. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Seconded, Councillor Turnbull. All those in favour? Carried. Councillor Lemon didn't vote this time.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
I've got a question to ask you about that, but I've forgotten what it was and I didn't write it down. So
You can ask me at the break. Okay. There is a minor change, slip rule change that I need to make to that anyway, so. Okay, questions on notice, motions on notice, we'll get to those later. So we'll go back to 11.1, which is Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move in accordance with the recommendation. I just had a query about the response to the state planning reforms and whether we made a council resolution just before Christmas, just before the closing date for the submission, the final submission to planning, the Planning and Design Code. Can that be placed on our info docs, please? Along with the other part of the resolution was the letter to our local MP, Vicky Chapman, raising our concerns with her about the content, and it was to do with the loss of tree canopy and the increase in grey cover as a result of the urban infill. So it'd be great. I didn't include that in the motion, but I assumed that would be circulated to us. Thank you.
Response is positive, that will come. Yes, Councillor Jones.
May I ask a question, please? Yes. Paragraph 39 on Glenunga Tennis Club. In our submission to the state government on the planning reforms, we've said we think use of private certifiers is a bad idea. And lo and behold, here we are using a private certifier on one of our own buildings. So I'm just wondering what's going on.
Through your worship, the contractor that we have selected for this project, Sarah Holmes, that's their standard practice, and we're following their approach.
Just hold a moment while the CEO just gets some more information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may, just a small point of clarification. In the planning reforms, the private certification that we're opposed to was the private planning certifiers, not private building certifiers. So our planners are the planners that assess this application, not private planning certifiers. Does that clarify the position? Councillor? What do you mean?
So what does the building certifier do?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. So I might throw that to Mr Cooper, give a more detailed response.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. The building certifier basically approves the standard of build. So it's quite different from the planning private certifier. So they are two different things. I don't know the technical ins and outs of exactly what the building certifier does, but
so through Madam Mayor, so the building certifier is comparing the plans as the construction plans against the building codes of Australia as they apply, and they're certifying that that building is projected to be built in accordance with those codes. And that can be done either by a council building surveyor or a private contractor. So that's what's occurred in this position. A private building certifier has undertaken the work, but the planning side has been undertaken by council. And that's what we were fundamentally opposed to in our submissions on the planning reforms. Yeah.
Okay, now, Councillor Davey and then Councillor Henschke. You have another question?
Thank you, yes, Mayor. To the CEO, I have one on the Regal Theatre Precinct Master Plan. There was, before COVID, the impacts of COVID struck us last time, there were scheduled meetings for community focus groups to talk about to provide input. They were all community members, all registered into the development of the draft master plan. And I wondered, that's all lapsed, and I just wondered when those focus group meetings would be resumed, please.
Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr Cant.
Through your worship, that's absolutely correct. We are actually just working through a revised programme and timeframe as we speak. We will certainly be looking to have those sessions. Originally we were only going to plan to have one. However, there's such a level of interest in it, we're planning to have more than one. Once we have a revised timeframe or milestones for you, I'll provide that information through information document.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. In the CEO's report, there are updates on various projects, and the Dulwich Community Centre is mentioned in the report's tabulation, and I'm asking if the CEO can provide expand on that with a verbal update, please.
Certainly through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr Cant, just to give us an update on perhaps where we're at and when the councils will be looking at that next.
Through your worship, following the workshop that was held late last year, Ms Taylor has been working with individual elected members to ensure that the information that was collated at that time is understood and everyone was involved in it. I understand that there is a survey that is with elected members just now through an information document that was distributed last week. We are looking for you to provide us with your favoured options that were considered at that workshop that were raised during that time, and it's our intention to bring a report back to Council next at the second meeting in March.
Councillor Hubert.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I just had a question about your meeting, Mr Cowley, with Andrew Cohen and John Blunt to discuss Burnside Village. I wonder if you could just give us a quick little rundown of where things stand. I'm getting pretty, fed up with residents saying to me, what's council doing about Burnside Village? And it's like, well, nothing to tell them at the moment.
So through Madam Mayor, So let me see. Yes, had a good meeting with Mr. Cohen and the Managing Director. A couple of the key details I can share. The trees that are planted around the perimeter of the car parking area as it stands at the minute will be retained on site but relocated. They're not going to remain in those positions. We did have a conversation about whether the building, as it's currently proposed, whether its form will be amended or not. And I think it's fair to say they're not 100% sure of how some things are going to fall at the minute. The cinemas are a question mark. I think they would like the cinemas to be retained, but they're still trying to understand how the cinema industry is going to operate in a COVID world. They've been heartened by the amount of demand they have from overseas luxury brands wanting to have a space in Burnside Village. They're actually in a situation right now where they're having to turn away tenancies because obviously they delayed their construction and they haven't got space for the number of businesses that wish to operate. They are still unsure because I think the new building was going to add another, it's either 70 or 90 retail spaces. They're still not 100% sure whether that number is right or whether it needs to be amended. But they are looking to be in a position, they were talking potentially, I think it's going to be in 18 months' time, where they'll actually have firmed up their position and being in a position to commence construction.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Firstly, I'm happy to second the motion. I do have an additional question, or maybe potentially an ask of the CEO, if I can. And I don't want to put too much work, but onto the CEO. But certainly under the section of other information, other updates and information, I was wondering whether or not we could add the reconciliation action plan as one of those items. It's sort of dropped off the list a little bit, and I just want to make sure that we're still looking forward to actually accomplishing that goal. I know in the LGA President's email yesterday that the LGA is taking a combined approach for a lot of councils to undertake a lot of this work. I'm hoping that Burnside has a representative on those committees.
I actually specifically mentioned that in my TGIF, that we're at that meeting and are taking an active interest in the group that they're looking to form. So the answer is yes, and a second yes, happy to include it as a standing item in that report to keep councils fully informed.
I'll just add to that, I did ask at that meeting if the LGA could compose a list of councils and where they are in their stages, because some have not started at all. Some have had reconciliation plans for a lot of years, and others are in the kind of process that we are, where we're starting. So that would be available to all councils, so people could contact different councils and find out, where are you, what problems have you encountered, and that was some of the things that was discussed at that meeting. What problems that some of the councils had, what breakthroughs they'd had, what frustrations, etc. So it was a very informative meeting in terms of getting the LGA on board to drive it for the state. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. Just referring back to Councillor Hubel's question about the Burnside Village and the update, is the council able to ask them to clean up their area and mow their horrible grass that's dying and fix up the bunting to make it look so bad in our council area? Do we have any clout to do that?
I'm happy to ask them to do that. Whether they do it's another matter, but I'm happy to make the approach.
Thank you.
Right, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I shall go back to Councillor Davis, you have a question?
Thought everyone else had a question. I thought I'd have a question. Through your worship, the CEO, the Reconciliation Committee, where was that at? Because that stalled for quite some time. We appointed some people to it, and I was wondering. what the next steps were with that.
Now, through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr Cant, just to give us a quick update.
Through your worship, I believe we were just waiting to appoint the external parties, which I believe they have been nominated now.
Yep.
And when I spoke with Farley yesterday, we're expecting to make contact with the elected members, give them an update through an information document, and we'll get it on track very soon.
Cool, thank you.
All right, I will go back to now Councillor Davey. The motion has been put, so those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, carried. 11.2, Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, but I just wanted to point out to everyone that in moving the officer's recommendation, what we're doing is we're actually renewing a policy that won't be renewed again, according to this, until 2025. And I think we need to keep that in mind, given that we're doing, the university's doing a study of our waste, and there may well be information that comes out of that that will actually have us renew this policy or change this policy earlier. But apart from just making that comment so that we have a watching brief on this, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Hubel, you wish to second it?
Yes, I didn't think I'd be seconding. I just wanted to say something. Yes, I'll second this. Look, I agree with what Councillor Lemon says. I think that, yeah, you know, the scheduled revisitation of this is a while away. But I dare say, given how much is happening in this space, this is probably something that we may want to come back to before that. Look, one thing I really noticed on it, I mean, I look at the assistance that we provide schools, but we aren't collecting their green waste specifically. We're encouraging them to collect their green waste, but kind of saying it on to them. Look, and I know there's, you know, public schools don't pay rates and all these sorts of things, but I think that's something that we could potentially move towards in the future. So I think there's a lot of developments that can happen in this area. So yes, definitely, I think that this may be revisited before it's due to.
Councillor Turnbull.
I really thank you, Mayor. It was a terrific report, but there was one omission that I found, and that's curbside dumping. That's when people put little bits and pieces out, like kids' trikes and baby seats, and not enough to have a pick-up from East Waste, but just bits and pieces. And some of that stuff's there 3 weeks later. Mattresses, up near us, we had 2 mattresses for 3 weeks. So I'm wondering who picks that up and who pays for it, from the curbside dumping?
Through Madam Mayor, I think I know the answer, but I'll refer that to Mr Cant.
Through the Mayor, the illegal dumping is covered by the local...
Phil, come to the microphone where it is, because even though you've got a big voice, it may not be picked up on the microphone for people at home.
Need to recalibrate. Through the Mayor, the Local Litter and Nuisance Act covers illegal dumping, and Council does pick up illegal dumping if it's left on the street and investigates the cause of it.
Yep.
Is that a scratch of head or a hand in the air, Councillor Jones? I just point out that today on the radio, there on ABC with Sonia Feldhoff, there was an interview with the lady from Adelaide University and another person talking about the East Waste project, and it painted a very, very positive picture of Burnside Council in what they are doing with East Waste in this project. So it'll be on media monitoring. You'll be able to follow it up if you were not able to hear it today. All right. I need to go now back to Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. If you can put the motion.
So those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Those against, carry. Councillor Davey. I've missed one. Glenside Road naming 11.3. Sorry, Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I'll once again move the officer's recommendation, but I did actually want to make some points here. One is that I'm happy that Cedar Woods has taken our recommendation and gone with it. We had 5 valid responses when we went to community consultation with this, and what's come up is another name, Alexander Dean Street, which isn't going to be used because that would then change the methodology of using botanical names for that area. I think it's unfortunate that we didn't have a history of this person beforehand, but perhaps what we can do is keep it in the back of our mind so that anything, you know, we might have a park, we might have a drinking fountain, whatever, we can use that name potentially at some stage in the future, but I'm very happy to recommend the office's recommendation.
Seek a seconder. Councillor Henschke, do you wish to speak? Anyone else wish to speak? Then I shall go back to Councillor Lemon. Put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Now I will go to Councillor Davies, 11.4.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to move an alternate motion to this one tonight, and that is that Council 1 receive and note the understory and ornamental planting enhancement report and attachment, and 2, include the Year 1 planting projects as provided in attachment A to this report at a value of $170,000 in the draft 2021-2022 budget and annual business plan, and 3, include a recurring budget of $110,000 in the long-term financial plan commencing in 2022-2023 to fund the upkeep and maintenance of the Year 1 planting projects as provided in attachment A to this report. After much discussion and deliberation, this is when I asked the staff what for their idea about what would be the best way to manage this. This was their suggestion, so I'm happy to move this tonight. As you will recall, the planting report we have tonight has reached this stage after 2 resolutions of Council on the 14th of April last year and the 12th of May last year, and we also had a workshop on the 5th of November to discuss the approach and what should be included and how we should go about it. So this report provides a robust, evidence-based map to enhance understory planting across the City of Burnside. I thank the staff who undertook the research and developed it to this stage, with significant input from the local councillors who know their suburbs and communities. Everyone round this table has had an opportunity to nominate sites for upgrade or replacement of open space areas which have depleted vegetation. And this has started and was mostly the result of the severe drought that we experienced a few years ago. I think that's what started a lot of the loss of our understory plantings. This is a very worthy long-term project of 3 years, and I'm proposing we start with the first year, as I've outlined, which includes the high priority areas for planting as identified and recommended by the staff. So there's a comprehensive list that we all have in our attachment that have been identified. With the finalisation of the Burnside 2030 strategic plan last year and the endorsement of the asset management strategy for 2021 to 2026 at our last council meeting, Council is aligning and streamlining its asset management plans and practices with our strategic objectives and plans and the long-term financial plan. So this work recognises climate change and the imperative we have to plan for this, to provide leadership on Council to the community and to use all possible means to reduce Council's carbon footprint. Understory and shrubs plantings across Burnside are a key component of this, especially as they support our urban forest initiative and the important wildlife habitats for our disappearing small birds, reptiles, etc. Critical mass is essential for all levels of greener plantings. Ornamental plants, native plants, shrubs and trees are all part of the green canopy, and the shrubs support the urban forest and complement the urban forest to survive. Notwithstanding the need to keep downward pressure on annual rate increases, I believe our green assets, as outlined, require renewal and that we should start the process and make this investment. So as we acknowledge all this valuable work, which has utilised so many resources to date, I hope you'll support this investment with this motion. Thank you.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Turnbull.
May I speak to it? In seconding this motion, there are a number of reasons why I really support it. First and foremost is the City of Burnside's green image. We're known for our green leafy streets and we will maintain green parks and reserves. We've got many great community spaces and parks and reserves within our city, and it's an important reason why people want to live here. However, some of these parks and reserves have not been developed or maintained to the standard of our better ones. And this was an area that Council identified in 2020, and the decision was made to undertake a 3-year plan of understory and ornamental plantings, a decision which led to the report. And since then, Council staff have undertaken much detailed work to identify and prioritise the many sites that are listed in the report. Elected members contributed to the information too. To now not proceed would to devalue the work that's already been done here. I think that reverting to occasional small projects through discretionary annual funding would seriously devalue the aim of this project. With due respect, as elected members, we're not experts in prioritising work such as this across the whole city, as our focus tends to be more localised to the issues in the ward we represent. I prefer a holistic approach and also alleviate the squeaky wheels approach. And I do accept that there's some pressure with respect to annual rate increases. However, I note that at this time, Council has not conducted any discussion on the prioritisation of projects where costs may be reduced. This project just seems to be the first where this is suggested. So costings for year 1 plantings are 168,000 or 170,000 from the 2021 budget. Ongoing costs are quoted as an estimate of 109,394. The breakdown in costs are 39,500 for water and 69,845 for labour. That's one full-time worker. However, many underplantings are not watered, e.g. Belliot Reserve. They survive on rainfall. Also, to decrease the number of paid hours and the necessity for more staff, we could send out a call via the Focus, social media, etc., for people in our council area who would like to be involved as volunteers. I personally know of several. The involvement of the various community volunteer groups would certainly decrease costs, and the cost of buying a new light vehicle to transport staff could surely be deferred. So let us implement year 1 of this report, review it after a year of operation, and keep enhancing and greening our beautiful suburbs. I certainly support the motion and I hope that you will too. Thank you.
Let's ask a question in terms of, there's a number of statements made by Councillor Turnbull in terms of like the car can be deferred. Is that what's happening? And the FTEs, what's the effect of this motion essentially?
Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer Council to page...
Just turn your microphone off, please.
Refer Council to page 65 of the agenda. There's a 4-year breakdown shown. Now, with the human resources that would be required to implement this motion in the original proposal, by the time we get to year 4, we're saying we would require essentially a utility. Now, in year 1, if that is implemented, we are not going to require the purchase of a utility vehicle because we'd only be incurring one additional, or about 0.6 or 0.7 of additional staff member. So we would be comfortable that cost is deferred. So we believe that's manageable within the parameters of this motion. Yes, does that clarify that component? One more staff member and no utility. I'll refer to Mr. Can. I think it's a percentage of a FTE.
It's through your worship, thank you. It's been calculated as approximately 1 FTE, and we would do it through the casual resource pool.
Councillor Lemon, question?
Yes, I do have a question. When we talked about this before, we talked about understory plantings before this, when we asked for this report to come back. One of the things that I haven't got out of this, and it could be that I've missed it, but one of the things I haven't got is why those understory plantings died in the first place. Because we had understory plantings, I've been told by many people now, or not staff, obviously, other people. We had understory plan, they just died, and I don't know why. Can you tell me, can anybody tell me why they went?
Through Madam Mayor, I have to refer that to Mr Cant. I haven't got the history on this item.
Through your worship, there may be a little bit of confusion about some of the understanding of what we were looking to do here. This actually looks at new or enhanced sites, this report. This doesn't actually look to those areas that may have died in the past, which may have been at a particular time on certain verges or certain areas that we may have turned off irrigation during the drought period. But that was before my time on council. So that's just an assumption. However, we do replace plant stock in existing garden beds when they die, and we do tend to existing garden beds. So I'm not aware of any in particular that have perished.
Next question, Councillor Hedgkey.
Yes, a question. The prioritisation of some of these, one in particular is in front of local heritage cottages and adjacent to a state heritage avenue, but it's been placed as a low priority, so and it hasn't got any plantings at all. And I'm just wondering why, in lining to our strategic plan, heritage is I thought it'd be a high priority. Thank you.
I'll get Mr Cant to clarify, but my understanding is it was only to give priority to the year that we would implement that particular planting. It was to give guidance to the year it would occur, not necessarily that it was a low priority in the broader context. So we're just saying the priority of implementation was high for the first year. It's not saying it wasn't a priority project, but it meant we couldn't afford to get to it to a later year.
So I don't, why defer?
Well, through Madam Mayor, because we couldn't afford to do all new one. It's simply a matter of funds.
Councillor Hughes, you're next.
Just wanted to clarify, so point 2 of the motion, this would go into the draft that would go out to community consultation, or the draft that comes to council for us to then approve to go to consultation? Does that make sense? There is a difference, is what I'm asking, what one this would be.
Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer to Mr Cooper as to his understanding of that wording.
Thank you. Through your worship, as you may recall, Councillor, we bring a draft budget back to the council for them to adopt for community consultation purposes. So if this motion gets resolved this evening, those figures will be included in that draft budget.
Right, Councillor Hubel, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. I have a question. I'm just looking at page 72 at paragraph 30.3, where it talks about the options. This motion seems to be looking at that part implementation option. Now, I read here that it says if that is in fact the preferred direction of council, which is where that's what we're discussing at the moment, a reassessment would be required based on the agreed priorities, which would be devised and used as a basis of any budget proposal. My reading of this motion as it stands and that position seems to be a little bit off. Can I just get a clarification on, or some commentary on that point?
Certainly, through Madam Mayor, I think if this motion that's before us is adopted, what that's essentially saying is council has made a determination, as per the last sentence of that of 30.3, that essentially it is saying they've identified those sites and when they wish to do those sites. An alternative way of doing that would be that each of these particular sites may have become separately through the budget process. That perhaps was the intent when that paragraph was written, but overlaying it with what's happening for us this evening, that's essentially what that would mean now, that council is determining that this first year is their priority.
Next question or comment is Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. I suppose I'm kind of on the same bandwagon in terms of the approach, but mine's going to point 3. The $110,000 ongoing in the budget for maintenance and upkeep of Year 1. Would the administration, if there was the ability for additional, for the Year 2 and 3 projects, long in the future, I'm thinking, maybe stretched over, is there possibility that that work could be done in that 110, one project a year or something like that, to sort of to look at some of those others? Or I'm looking for some scope creep in the project in terms of ongoing resourcing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the important thing to take into account here is that whilst you might add 1 or 2 new planted areas each year or half year, over time that adds up and it produces a stretch on an existing resource, and there's a trigger point where you get to the point where it becomes a new person. There is a point where you do get to have some scope creep and we can ask some more of our existing resource and get the job done. But I think there's a point where council needs to acknowledge that if we do want to provide this level of service, we do need to match it with the additional human resource. So it's the one point where I think this is the point for me to push back and say we're actually delivering a level of service with our current human resource, and this is now going to push us to the point where if council wishes to deliver it, which is okay, you need to acknowledge that and provide me with the additional human resource.
Next is Councillor Lemon to question or speak.
Yeah, I do. I have another question. And mine is one of semantics, actually. When I think about this, I think of understory plantings. When I read the report, this is mainly about ornamental gardens. And I actually think we need to know what we're talking about here, because understory plantings is something that goes under existing trees and gives a different layer of possibly native vegetation, one hopes native vegetation. Ornamental plantings is another thing altogether, and I really don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm going to be voting for, I guess. So what I'm looking for is, what is this mainly about in terms of those two things?
I think in short, Madam Mayor, it is actually talking about a combination of those two things. But I'll refer to Mr. Cant if he can provide more clarity.
Yeah, through your worship, during the workshop in the previous council report, we actually provided council with a definition of both understory and ornamental plantings at that stage. And following that time, council in the resolution actually advised the administration to go away and develop a 3-year plan for understory and ornamental plants. So it is a combination of both.
Councillor Davis.
I just wanted to question the amount in point 3 of the 110,000, because if you refer to the table on 65, it might just be that I'm not reading this wrong, but I guess my question is, what is if we plant $170,000 worth of projects, is 110,000 reoccurring correct? Yeah.
It's true, Madam Mayor. So if I can refer you to the second year of that table, where it refers to the water allocation of 39,500 and the labour component. So that 39,000 water allocation is to water those plantings of the year before.
Right, I see.
And that labour, again, is the ongoing maintenance for those plantings of the year before. So yes,
thank you.
It is the correct number.
Cheers.
Councillor Jones.
Hey, this was not the meeting for Councillor Piggott to miss, really, was it? I think this is a worthy project, but it's preempting the budget process, because I don't know what other worthy projects there are out there, and we can't afford all the worthy projects. And last meeting, we reaffirmed that we were telling the CEO to freeze the budget. And then 2 weeks later, here we are saying, CEO, we want to spend some more money. We got to be consistent, people. We're about to have 2 workshops on the budget. Paul and I have put a budget bid in, and if this goes through tonight, the first thing the CEO is going to do is put a line through our budget bit and say, sorry guys, you spent all the money already. So I think, frankly, we really need to see everything that's out there before we take decisions on, cherry-picking projects in advance of that process. So I think, I'm not saying I would vote against this in the final budget, but I think we should follow the process that gives equal chance to everyone.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you. If I may, through you to the CEO. That's a very interesting proposition, but I thought the 2 processes that the process that Councillor Jones was outlining is totally separate to this process. Is that not so, in terms of what items will be considered for development of the budget? I mean, we have a whole lot of issues and decisions that come up that Council makes, which will then be funded in the budget and business plan. And then we have our discretionary budgets. Is that correct? And they're different and not mutually exclusive.
Through you, Madam Mayor, my understanding of what's occurring this evening is that if this decision gets up, that's essentially locking it in to our draft budget to be considered outside of our normal draft budget process, which presents Council with the holistic picture. Now, when I present the draft budget to Council, just assume this gets up this evening for the sake of the argument, I will probably be presenting the budget in light of the resolution from the other evening, where Council gave me some parameters to deliver, and I'll be saying I've delivered those parameters plus 0.4% rate rise to deal with this item. Therefore, Council will be seeking a rate rise of X. That's how I'll be approaching, at this point in time, I believe I'd have to approach this matter. Does that clarify? And if I may, sorry, I missed one of your points, Councillor Davey. Yes, it is a fair comment that in the budget process there are some notional allowances made for elected member bids and administration bids into the budget process. But as I say, tonight's resolution essentially means we are considering this outside of that process.
Councillor Lemon, do you wish to speak or another question?
No, I've got another question actually. So, given that you've just said that, what would it take then for us tonight to put this in that process?
Through Madam Mayor, it would require just a minor wording change, and I'll take advice from Mr Cooper on what the exact words will be, but it will be to point 2, thinking on my feet here, and refer, I would use the language, refer it to the draft 21 budget process, because that means I can take this as a discrete budget bid and drop it in to the number of projects that we're considering. Do you concur with that, Mr Cooper?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. Yeah, alternatively, you could just ask for it to be included with the other budget bids, so to treat this as a budget bid.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Lemon? You wish to speak now?
I'll speak now. I'd like to amend this motion and include this with the other budget bids when we go into our budget bid process. I actually think this is very worthy, but what we're doing is we're picking up 1 year. We're not picking up 5 or 4, and to me that's bitsy. So given that this is only 1 year that we're picking up, I think it fits very nicely into our budget bids. It gives the community an opportunity to actually vote on it, and it gives us an overall opportunity to look at how it works on our bottom line. To put this through so late in the day, and I mean, I'm not saying that this isn't a good thing to do. I think it is a good thing to do, but I actually think it needs to be balanced against all the other good things we do, and also be balanced against what we told administration at the last meeting. And you may or may not recall, one of the things that I said was, it's all very well for us to put in savings targets, but let's not come here twice a month and ask for this and then ask for that and erode those. So I actually think we need to show some discipline from the get-go, and the discipline will be that this goes into the budget process and gets treated the same as every other worthy project, because the projects that are being put forward for the budget process will all be worthy. And I think the community gets the opportunity then to, in fact, endorse this for us as well, because they're the ones that are in fact paying. So I hope somebody seconds it.
So you happy with the wording that Wendy has put forward there for you, Councillor Lemon?
Planning project provided and attached, yeah. And yes, I'm not sure about point 3. Can I get advice on point 3, please? Oh yes, no, because you don't want to plant them and then not upkeep and maintenance needs to be part of it. So is administration clear about what that would mean for them?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, I'm clear on what that means, and I'll state back my understanding. So my understanding of that is that the first
No,
year...
keep point 3.
Can we see the whole motion?
Yeah, you've got to...
If I may, Madam Mayor. Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
yeah, drop it down. My understanding will be that the first year of projects will be referred to the projects to be considered as part of the draft budget.
Yes.
And as part of the consideration of year 1, we will demonstrate that to include that would require an allocation of the long-term financial plan to cover the ongoing maintenance.
Councillor Hubel, you wish to second the amendment? You've only asked a question, so that's quite okay.
Yes, I'm happy to second, but I'll defer my right to speak for the time being.
If I can suggest, Madam Mayor, I think point 3 can, if you, in point 2, if you incorporated the words at the end there, something on the lines of, and the ongoing cost, and the reflection of the ongoing costs in the long-term financial plan, then you could delete point 3. Does that work?
So what the meeting's trying to say. So we just delete number 3 now, don't we? Let's just got points 1 and 2. Councillor Davey, you understand that now?
Thank you. Could I just have some clarification again? So how does a budget bid differ from the 2 resolutions of council that we've already had to date to get to this stage, and the status it's now got as a budget bid?
So they are discrete processes, but ideally the recommendation that we put before you talked about approaching this by individual budget bids to the budget process. The approach that I would have always recommended would have been the one that's now there as an amendment. The timing of this is probably what comes into account, and the opportunity was always available to elected members to put this up as an individual budget bid. So this probably is a timing matter, but but I think it is always important not to try and circumvent our budget process. So this amendments before us seeks to keep this all together as a genuine budget process. So the council is considering all of its priorities at the same time.
So, Councillor Davis, you wish to speak to the amendment, or still have a question?
Yeah, I'll speak against the amendment. My understanding of a budget bid and this process is very different. So this is not a budget bid that's been raised by one of us. This is not because in a budget bid, anybody can put forward a proposal that we put a playground here, that we do a specific thing. This is actually a number of resolutions of council together, as the whole of us, who have decided to progress this motion forward and get a report. So this is not Councillor Davies' motion, and this report has not come from just one councillor. This has come as a result of all of us voting to continue down this process. And to my mind, that's very different than a budget bid process. So the budget bids generally come up from individual nominations or from staff bids on discrete items, which are generally minor in nature. This, on the other hand, is talking about a change in the level of service that we would provide to our residents. And what we're looking to do is to include this in the draft 21-22 budget that then comes back to this council before it's put to the community. So if we look at the draft budget that comes back to us at that time, and it says we need a rate increase of 3%, or then at that time we can say, well, no, we don't want to go out with that such a large rate increase. What projects can we remove to cut some fat out of our budget? And this one would probably be on the chopping block, I would say. But what this does, what I think the original motion does, and I support the original motion, is that it includes it in our draft budget. It will be prepared along those budget lines, and we will have that included to go out to the community. But we can vote as a council to remove that from the draft budget. And I think that that is a very different process from individual member bids. Did you want to interrupt?
I'd never want to interrupt, but I will comment after you finish speaking.
Okay. And so to my mind, what we're looking at here is, do we want to continue with this activity or do we not? And I think that what's actually happening is that we're more concerned and not understanding what this expenditure would mean and what the benefit to our ratepayers would particularly be. Because at the moment, on page 70, what I'm looking at paragraph 26, is number of projects 45, 170 in the first year, and then in the third year, number of projects 17, 300. And then the projects in the suburb. To me, my difficulty in really understanding what this is I don't understand what the impact would be on the community and what Burnside would look like at the end of it. And if we look at something, say, like Dulwich the wading pool in Tusmore Park, I can see that because I've got an image of it and I understand what the impact would be. I think that the reticence around here is we don't know really what we're getting, if we're getting bang for buck, or what the outcome would be. So what I would suggest instead is that we try to understand that point in particular, but we have gone, and for us to understand that, but we have gone down this process.
That's it, Councillor Davis. Thank you. Councillor Henschke, you wish to speak to the amendment?
3 minutes, very short time to talk.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Well,
Sorry, Councillor Henschke. I did not give the opportunity for the CEO to respond to that, so I'll come to you immediately after that. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say, I think I'm in furious agreement with Councillor Davis, and it's just about the understanding of what included in the draft budget means. So, if I can just reflect on the amendment that was moved by Councillor Davey, if your intent is that council has an opportunity, once it sees all the figures come together, to review that draft budget before it goes out, that's where my head's at. The way it's worded right now, in terms of, I think, administration's understanding, is that it doesn't imply that opportunity to review before going out. So that's all I'm trying to achieve, well, or the amendment's now trying to achieve, is, I think, that clarity around the opportunity to review it before it gets locked into the draft that goes for community. That's what the amendment's seeking to achieve.
Yeah, because it goes with all the other budget bits. So it's not in the budget, not in the draft budget that comes to us, right? Was that budget process happened before? No, the budget bits happen before we vote yes or no, and then you bring us a draft budget, right?
Yep. So in terms of the, through you, Madam Mayor, in terms of the process, we're right in the mix now of putting together the draft budget. And so this project can be put into that melting pot for us to present a final outcome to council. Now that could be presented with a number of options, and the options being this project in, cost is X, this project not in, cost is Y, or a number of machinations in between. So that's, from my understanding, the amendment that's before us now achieves that goal.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you. I'll just be very brief, but look, the data's there, the facts are there. The Adelaide's one of the country's most, one of the two most vulnerable cities from the killer heat waves. The facts are there that the city of Burnside's got the nation's second highest level of grey cover growth. And we're arguing about putting a few shrubs in. And I really do think that we need just to get on with this. It is critical with urban growth that we do increase understory. We will certainly have lots of subdivisions of land, and I'm sure the revenue gained by that will offset the cost of this in the longer term. Thank you.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. A question through you to the CEO. If you could just clarify my understanding of the budget process. My understanding is that we will, in the next little while, be considering elected member budget bids, but we also consider administration budget bids, things that the administration doesn't have currently in place as permanent expenditure, but they are proposing that, hey, this is a new thing. Am I correct in thinking that this motion or the amendment seeks to just include this project as an administration bid? Is that accurate?
Yeah. I'll refer it to Mr. Cooper, for you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Through your worship. Perhaps one way of looking at this that might help clarify is that any budget process that we undertake has a pot of money for discretionary projects, and we allocate that discretionary bucket, as it were, against elected member bids that are put forward and bids from the administration. And we go through a budget process for the elected members to assess those bids against that pot of money. If the original motion went up tonight, what that effectively does is to say to the administration, the elected members want that project to progress through to the draft budget phase, and for the administration to treat that as a cost pressure. So it's kept quite separately from the other bids that are bidding for funds from the bucket. If the amended motion goes through this evening, this particular project will be treated with the others in terms of competing for that pot of money that's available in discretionary spend.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, it was. Thank you very much for that clarification, because when I was preparing this motion and having, been very involved in this project, I asked the administration for advice, and so I've got two different, with all respect, I sent a request to the CEO's office, and Barry Cant sent the detailed first recommendation through to me. So, and now we've got a second one that...
I'm still waiting for a question.
The CEO is recommending. So I'm just worried about the confusion.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't believe there's any confusion. A draft alternate motion was presented to me for comment, and as to whether the word, to achieve your desired outcome. And as I normally do, I provided my best advice to achieve your desired outcome. I was not confused about that at all.
Councillor Davis, you have one question, and then you can have.
All right. So the former motion would require an increase in rates of a certain percentage, and then that would be ongoing every year. And that would be a once-off increase in rates, and then that would be accumulated through of 0.4. As opposed to a pot of money, which is always budgeted for in our long-term financial plan, and won't increase our long-term financial plan increase in rates. Did I make that worse or better? Probably worse.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I did get lost in there in the middle. Can I please clarify that for me?
So there is a pot of money for discretionary spending. Say it's, how much would it be?
Through your worship, 400,000 approximately.
Okay. So there's $400,000 in our budget every year that we allocate for members and staff to bring bids for. This is not, the original motion was seeking not to take money from that discretionary spend of 400,000, but was essentially seeking to have a rate rise to cover the costs of this higher service level. Yes. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. Through your worship, potentially yes, but not necessarily so. If this project, if the original motion goes up, it's basically saying to the administration, council has resolved for $170,000 to be set aside in the draft budget. So administration will go away and work out the impact of that additional cost together with its review of its operating costs for next year, and then come back with a recommendation for the rates. That may or may not have to be higher specifically for this project. If all things were the same, then yes, potentially that would result in an increase in rates, but at this stage we are unable to say whether that can be accommodated within normal budget process or not.
Right, so it could be the case that...
No, you've had one question. Now we go to Councillor Hughes.
Oh, sure.
I just wanted to seek clarification because there's been a number of points made this evening that this would benefit the environment. Could we just clarify that 7.2 is stating that there would be minimal benefit in terms of climate change mitigation? And I guess if staff could elaborate, if we were to say spend $170,000 on tree plantings, would there would be an environmental benefit as opposed to understory plantings?
Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr. Cant.
Through the Mayor. There's likely to be, or there would be an environmental benefit with any planting. Would this provide the greatest environmental benefit possible for the spend? Unlikely. But there would definitely be environmental benefit. It's probably worth mentioning we're also embarking on a research project to look at biodiversity sensitive urban design through the council, which could inform future work in this space, but we haven't done that yet.
Councillor Cornish, you're next, and then Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Worship. And speaking to the amendment, I won't be supporting the amendment, all due respect. I personally believe that this should be a budget bid that goes ongoing. We've asked for it to go ongoing. We've asked to lift the standards across the board, and I think it should be put in that part of the budget and not the discretionary part of the budget. So I'd be supporting the original motion. The community will still get its say on the annual business plan. It's going to go out to them with this project in it, so they'll still get their say. We're just bypassing a lot of other processes internally to get it to that position by doing the original motion. So I won't support the amendment, and I will support the original motion. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Davis.
In terms of a budget bidding for $400,000 pool, and if it goes through that process rather than through being included in the draft budget and then costed in with all the other operational expenses, if it goes into the bidding pool, will the continuing water expenditure go into our long-term financial plan, come out through as a rate rise, or will it be a continual withdrawal from the pool?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer that to Mr Cooper.
Thank you. Through your worship, all projects that have ongoing operational costs, once they're resolved, those operational costs get built into ongoing budgets and hence reflected in the long-term financial plan, which potentially could, yes, increase rates over time, but again, it's considered as part of the pot.
Okay. So that the 170 will come out of the pot, ongoing expenses such as water maintenance won't, essentially. Yes.
Through your worship, it depends what you mean by the pot. So the
400,000 discretionary spending.
The 170,000 is incurred in the year that the budget's approved.
Yep.
That's gone and done and dusted. But
Yep.
then you've got an ongoing operational cost of 110 to maintain those works in effect.
Yes.
So
And that
yes,
won't
it goes-
come out of the discretionary spending
No,
budget.
that's correct.
Cool. I have one more question.
No, if anyone else wishes to speak first or ask a question. Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, this is a very, very difficult matter, isn't it? And so many speakers tonight have said, I support what Councillor Davies put forward, because this has been a long process. And I want to take council back to why we actually did this. And that was because when we first came on council, 7 of us, there were elected member bids and people were putting forward projects for their particular ward. And we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to have a holistic view of the whole city. And we have got that now. So I'm quite pleased to see there is an overall plan. In the prioritisation framework, there are a number of different areas, but the two that I'd like to highlight were habitat and biodiversity opportunity, which I gave a big tick for, and locality, which is a little bit of equity on our side, because there is a belief, unfortunately within Burnside, that there are some areas that are done very well and others have yet to be done as well. So I don't mind if we have this in our budget going forward, and if it produces too high a rate, well, this council can have another look at it. But at this stage, I think I'll be supporting it based on the various arguments being put tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the longer we leave this, the more confused we're getting, and I think we're spinning out of control here. Let's look at the core of what we're talking about here. Councillor Davey has put forward a motion that makes the city of Burnside greener and prettier. And I think we are all in favour of that. It'd be very hard pressed to find an elected member on this council who's not in favour of making this city greener and prettier. In terms of making it prettier, I couldn't agree more, especially in my area. And I've said in workshops and in council before that certainly the Glenside and the Glenunga area used to be a lot prettier than it is now. There's no flowers anymore, the roundabouts don't even have grass anymore. It's just dirt and rocks, and doesn't look very nice at all. So what this motion is asking for is that we put forward a motion that we've all agreed upon in previous months and years to making our city greener and prettier. Anything that does that makes our streets and our parks nicer, more homely, and it makes the city of the people of the city of Burnside more house proud, and to enjoy living in Burnside better. So look, let's just cut to it and say that we all agree. Now, I think we're getting confused by the amended motion about discretionary and non-discretionary and so forth. I think bottom line is this is very, very important. More important than saving a couple of bucks in your rates notice. There are some things that are more important than a low rates notice. and this is one of them. So I think we should vote the amended motion down, and let's get on with it. We've all agreed with this in the past, we just haven't agreed on the amount. So let's just do it and get on with it, because the City of Burnside desperately want it and need it.
Councillor Davis, you have a question?
The ongoing maintenance for water, with a budget of $110,000 continuing on each year, does that ever reduce to zero, like once the understory plantings have been established?
Through Madam Mayor, there's two components.
Yep.
There's the water component, which is 39,000, and there's the labour component, which is 70,000. So the labour component will continue to exist, and I'll have to take advice on the watering component. Mr. DeCant.
Through your worship, with respect to these projects, it would be unlikely. So this would include irrigation being installed for the majority of these sites, and the plantings that would be put in there to survive would require ongoing watering. It wouldn't be a biodiversity site.
Right, we've got a lot of people who've asked questions, not a lot of people who have spoken. Councillor Hubel, you haven't spoken on the amendment, you have seconded it, but if there is no one else who wishes to speak, then I'm going to need to go to you to speak. So last chance, if anyone wishes to speak on this amendment. Actually, there's still an opportunity, but Councillor Hubel was, I think, trying to hold. Yeah. So, Councillor Hubel, you happy to speak now?
Yes, thank you. I've been following the debate with great interest. I acknowledge that I'm not an expert in environmental management. I know there's a couple in the room that are. And as a rule, I really like to take the advice of officers' recommendations in the reports. I think we have good staff, excellent staff, and I think their advice is something I take very, very seriously. And whenever we deviate from officers' recommendations, I tend to get quite hesitant. I think this is absolutely critical. I think I voted for, asking for a report into this. I think ornamentals are great. What I don't like is the bypass of process that I think that the original motion, I'm speaking to the amendment here, I don't like the bypass of process that the original motion effectively does. I think this is a bit of a compromise, but look, in a perfect world, I would follow the officer's recommendation. And as far as bang for buck in terms of environmental benefit, I would follow the advice of what the experts have to say. So I hope that this amendment does get up. I hope that we're not compromising alternate projects which may come up in the budget process, which may be very worthy. We don't know what they are yet. I feel it would be irresponsible to go with the original motion tonight, because I think we're cutting off options we don't even know we have yet, and I just think that's irresponsible. So I hope this amendment gets up.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the amendment?
Can we all speak on it, even if I spoke on it?
No. Correct me if I'm wrong, Governance Officer. Right, well, if we have no one else who wishes to speak, I will put the amendment. Now, the amendment, it's clear that the amendment is the one that's on the screen at the moment. Those who are in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Those against? Right, lost. We move back to the original motion that was put by Councillor Davey. And is there anyone who wishes to speak on that? Because there are quite a few who have not spoken, only asked questions. But if you've spoken on the amendment, please advise me of this. You cannot speak again? So they can speak on the motion as well? No, they can't. So if they've spoken already, and I've got a record of that, okay. So there are quite a lot of people who have not spoken. Councillor Davis, you have spoken on the amendment. Yep. So has Councillor Henschke. No, question. Another question?
I wanted to understand, there's the 23/24 operational spend for the third year projects is a one-off spending of 300,000, but then the water and the recurring budget doesn't increase by an equivalent amount. Why is the third year spend so high, but then it doesn't require the ongoing maintenance as opposed to the others, which seem to have a high proportion?
Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr. Cant.
Through the Mayor, if I refer you to the attachment which shows the breakdown of years 1 through to 3, you can see there are projects that make up each of those years. Year 3 has projects that are slightly higher initial setup cost in terms of what's going in. The actual water-related ongoing costs are not necessarily equivalent to those setup costs.
According to me, there are only two people who have not spoken on the amendment or the motion, and they are Councillor Lemon and Councillor Hughes.
No, Councillor Lemon has, she put in the amendment.
Oh, sorry, you put the amendment, of course. Yes, sure. So it's only Councillor Hughes.
But I think we've actually heard it all tonight, and I'd just like to clarify, Councillor Davis said, oh, we voted for this. What we actually voted for was to get a report, and it's no different to the reports Councillor Carbone has asked for, reports, Councillor Hubel has asked for. There's actually no difference. Just because we've asked for a report on something doesn't mean we have to vote for it, doesn't mean that we're committed. And while I see the value in creating a green City of Burnside, I can't believe I'm going to say this for about the third time this year, I actually agree with Councillor Jones. And I think that we should, we've just sat here and we just last week, well not last week, 2 weeks ago, it feels like last week, had the debate, and Councillor Davis is the one that brought up about the woman with her tea bag. And people don't want to just see rates increase and increase and increase. And as an elected member, I think we need to be responsible with how we do that. I think we should go through the budget and that bid process and actually review, because this is making a long-term commitment. It's not just a one-off project, and I think it should be considered holistically with the whole budget being looked at, because we have just made that decision at the last meeting about trying to put a lot of pressure on the CEO to hold rates steady. So I won't be supporting it, not because I don't believe that we should green the City of Burnside, but I think we should consider it as part of the overall budget process.
Right, now Councillor Davey, it goes back to you to summarise before I put it to the vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for all the interesting contributions and questions. It's been very interesting exploration. The bottom line is, we're talking about our environment. I mean, it's in trouble. We've committed to climate change, and this is just a small part of helping with climate change. I know people seem to have trouble visualising, but we promote ourselves as a green city. Well, we have lost a lot of our greenery. It is patently obvious. There's no measurement, unfortunately, that we can use as we would for footpaths or curbing or our roadways. The plants just die and fade away until we realise we haven't got as many birds, we haven't got as many lizards and all the small animals, as well as the beauty that Councillor Carbone mentioned that we expect in our open space and suburbs. So this is an investment in our environment. It's a small investment. I don't see it as a huge amount, and it has significant benefits for climate change mitigation, all of the key features that we know are important for dealing with our warming climate and our increasingly grey paved areas as we lose our gardens. So I believe we need to proceed with this investment. We expend serious amounts of money on our hard assets, and I think this will go into the budget process, will need to be justified. It won't necessarily result in a rates increase. Our staff are very skilled at dealing with all of the demands that are made and the requests that are made, and then putting up a proposal to us for council to consider, and then for our community to decide. I don't think this is undermining any budget bids that any other elected member would want to put in. So I think it's pretty straightforward. It's not a huge amount of money, but it is an investment in our environment, and I think our community expects this. So we have the tools to improve our environment, we just have to choose to use them. I think this is one of those tools, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Right, those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Division has been called. Please stand, those who supported the motion. Councillor Henschke, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Davey, Councillor Davis, Councillor Carbone, Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Dawes. Those against, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Lemon, Councillor Jones and Councillor Hubel. Thank you. Councillor Dawes is departing. I do need to acknowledge the fact that he's actually going to Adelaide University to receive an award for service to university sport. So, right, now we move to with questions on notice. Then everyone has received the table document on that. Motions on notice. The first one is 13.1. Councillor Turnbull.
I wish to defer motion 13.1 until the next council meeting. Thank you.
Right, so you seek a seconder for that? Yep. So, thank you, Councillor Carbone. Those in favour? I'll just ask those hands to go up again. You wish to withdraw it until the next meeting, defer it to the next meeting. It has been moved, it has been seconded. I now just seek those who support that, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right, so the motion needs to be put. Councillor Turnbull.
Councillor Turnbull, wish to move this motion. Number 1, to amend the elected members' allowance and benefit policy clause from 6.55, meals and refreshment, 6.551, a light meal prior to council committee and council assessment panels will be provided for elected members and independent members, and 6.552, following council meetings, light refreshments may be provided in the Mayor's parlour at the discretion of the Mayor. Responsible service of alcohol is to be followed as required by the Liquor Licensing Act 1997. 2, 6.55, meals and refreshment. 6.551, a light meal prior to committee and council assessment panel meetings will be provided for elected members and independent members. Right, so moving this motion, I'd like to share my reasons for moving it. It's all about image, the image and the perception that we as elected members present to the ratepayers and to the public. It's not particularly about the cost of the catered meals for the elected members. This cost is a relatively modest one in the scheme of things. Though of course every saving made does help the council budget and allows funds to be better spent elsewhere. But it's about our image as elected members and how the ratepayers and the public view us as councillors of Burnside Council. We are all very aware of the embarrassing and negative publicity resulting from the recent release of the Ombudsman report and of the past misuse of council credit cards and funds. Although this report refers to the recent past and before the election of this council, I strongly feel, as I think you might, that as Burnside Council we are continue to be stigmatised by those past malpractices and largesse. We need to work at shedding this embarrassing record of excess at the expense of the ratepayers. I repeat, I recognise the cost of the EM mills is relatively minor, but there'll always be a perception that we as EMs are still indulging. To help address this, I propose that Council amends the elected members' allowance and benefits policy clause 6.55 meals and refreshments. Firstly, by removing 6.552, as this is no longer relevant and hasn't been for 2 years. Secondly, by amending 6.551 so that meals are no longer provided for EMs before council meetings, but light meals are still available for committee meetings and capped for both EMs and independent members, as these meetings begin at 6 p.m. and this supports people attending immediately after work. As the council meetings begin at 7 p.m, EMs should have adequate time to organise their own meals. We as EMs get a monthly allowance to pay our expenses, you know, the petrol, use of car,
Councillors, please don't speak while the
phone,
member is
home
speaking.
office, etc. And this should be adequate to cover meal costs as well. The regular provision of catered meals is not a standard workplace practice. In all my various workplaces, there've never been free regular catered meals. You bring your own food or you buy it. And if you're working back or on a late shift, you bring your evening meal. You store it in the fridge and if needed, use the microwave to heat it. It's easy, really. At the previous council meeting, while discussing the report, An Approach to Future Savings, several elected members were vocal about saving council money. And I quote, "What we can shave off helps us save money. We need to make savings actively, give back to the ratepayers." All who spoke talked about finding savings. So, even though this motion would save a minor amount of money, we've talked about it, so let's do it and let's be seen doing it. Free catered EM meals have been a historic indulgence. It's time for the clean slate. Our CEO has wisely decreed no more credit card use to buy alcohol and barista coffee. So we can do our bit to enhance our image by voting for no more regular rate-paid funded meals. As I said earlier, it's about image. I ask you to support this motion and to take this step in proving how the public sees us.
Councillor, that's the finish.
Right.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Carbone. You wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak?
Thank you, Worship. I'll speak now. I've often felt a little bit uncomfortable about the process that has undertaken. We get an allowance, as Councillor Turnbull mentioned. That's it. There's no top-ups, there's no bonuses, there's no things on the side. We get an allowance to cover our time and our expenses. So I've never really bought the argument that because we're volunteering, we somehow deserve a meal when we arrive. We get paid. It is no different from any of us rocking up to work and somehow expecting a free meal at the start of the shift or a free meal at the end of the shift. I don't see what the difference is between us going to work and us coming here for a council meeting. It's effectively the same. We are serving our ratepayers. We are here for them. So I've never bought the argument that it helps us bond better. And I've never bought the argument that it's because, well, we're here and I don't have time for dinner and so forth. For goodness sake, we all come here from work, or most of us. We all get paid. You have money in your pocket to go through KFC and pick up a burger on the way. So that's all I'll say. I think we have outreached this. I think it is no longer socially acceptable. The Mayor, as I've mentioned, upon election, decided that the serving of alcohol was to be stopped to save cost. And I think the stopping of the serving of food, and I'm okay with sandwiches and a can of Coke, but hot meals at the cost of about $30 each plus, I don't think is no longer socially appropriate. We get an allowance, that's it.
Councillor Lemon.
I wish to put a formal motion that the motion be put.
Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Davis. Then the motion is put. Those in favour? So you vote on whether the okay. So those in favour of the motion being put.
Motion being put. What motion?
Hang on. Clear on it? No. All right. I need you to put your hands up again. Right. One motion be put. 1, 2. 6, 7, okay, right. Then I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against?
Division.
Those who were in favour, please stand. Oh, you can change mine. Councillor Carbone, Councillor Turnbull and Councillor Henschke. Those against, Councillor Cornish, Hughes, Davey, Davis, Lemon, Jones and Hubel. Thank you. You like your food. Now Councillor Lemon, it's your motion, 13.2.
Thank you. Trust Lane. Trust Lane runs parallel with Greenhill Road, behind buildings on Greenhill Road. So on one side they've got the back of buildings on Greenhill Road, on the other side they've got the back of buildings on Hawkville Terrace. It was closed in 2002 and recently was reopened during some building work that was taking place in Birkin Street. The construction company closed off Birkin Street, and so Trust Lane was reopened to give egress to Fullerton Road to stop congestion. At some stage at the end of last year, a survey took place with local residents about whether they wanted the lane open or closed, and what I'm asking for here is that the background, the closing of the lane in 2002, the opening of the lane in 2020, and the results of the survey be brought to this council at, not at the 23rd, the first meeting in March, because this should have been up last time. And the reason I want that, though, I have one principal reason for that, and that is because this is at a lane in Eastwood, and less than half a kilometre from this lane in Eastwood, there's Matilda Lane in Eastwood. And we were looking at sorting Matilda Lane for close on 8 years, if not longer. And the reason we had such trouble with it was that nothing was documented. I want this to come to council as a report so that there's a point in time where the status of Trust Lane is documented. So if people go to it in 10, 20, 30 years' time, they know what it was like in 2021. So I hope you support this, that a lot of the information's already there. It's not a lot to come to council, and it actually puts it on the public record as a document for the future.
Seconder, please. Councillor Hughes. Anyone who wishes to speak on this? Councillor Cornish.
Just a question of the administration. We definitely have that report easily to provide. Thanks.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I'll return to Councillor Lemon. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Has anyone any urgent or other business subject to the leave of the meeting? Councillor Hubel.
Thank you. You take this as a question without notice. I was, reading the infodoc we received yesterday on the Ranger Services dog attack quarterly report for October to December 2020, and I was pretty horrified that a koala had been killed by a dog. And from what I can gather, what we've been able to do is and this happened on private land, and what we've been able to do is secure the property so this dog can't escape. It's a bit shocking that the property wasn't sufficiently secure prior, and then the gum trees have been fenced. Now, I know we all love koalas in this room, and I just wonder if I could float it to the room. Do we have more powers to protect native wildlife from, pets that are obviously not under effective owner control, even on their property?
Through Madam Mayor, I'm not sure of the question.
It's just something I'm posing to everyone.
Is it?
other business.
It's a rhetorical question.
Maybe we should think about doing a bit more. I don't know. I'm posing the
Can we just let the CEO respond?
Three, Madam Mayor, in all seriousness, I'm happy to take that question on notice and provide a response to what our options might be in that space.
Probably not a lot, but yeah, we can try. Okay. No confidential motions, so I will close the meeting at 8:46. And thank you for your presence.